We have a guest speaker this morning. Okay, an old friend, Rabbi Michael Monson, comes from Philadelphia, and he has had a long and distinguished rabbinic career, including being a rabbi in a synagogue. Right? You did a synagogue. What was the name of the synagogue?
Shomer Emunah in Montclair, New Jersey.
Shomer Emunah in Montclair, New Jersey, and other august positions in the community.
JPS.
You were
the head of JPS.
The editor-in-chief of JPS?
No, I was the
president of JPS. The czar of the Jewish Publication Society of Philadelphia. But he is most well known for having made a very serious contribution to Valley Beth Shalom of his son, Ami. All right? And Ami's son, Moshe, graduated nursery school this week. And so Michael's come in to share that simcha with us. So we wish you mazel tov.
Thank you.
The first of many, many graduations, of course. But simply the sweetest of the many graduations. And Michael's been doing some wonderful research on, I think he called it the Torah of Jerusalem and the Torah of Philadelphia.
Right.
Which I'm so excited to hear. So this morning, please welcome our dear friend, Rabbi Michael.
Thank you.
I'm going to mess with the air conditioner.
Unlike Rabbi Feinstein, I'm going to stand. That's largely a function of my back, so it's more comfortable for me to stand. Before, there used to be a saying in Yiddish, which I'll translate, before I speak, I'd like to say a few words. And the words are personal indulgence. My wife and family feel a tremendous debt of gratitude to Rabbi Feinstein and to this synagogue for the wonderful welcome which you have accorded my son and my family. You can't imagine the wonderful feelings I have. I also want you to know that it may be on tape, but I get a personal report every Saturday night or Sunday on what goes on here, and from a phone call from Ami. I am obviously exceedingly proud of what Ami has accomplished, but I am also exceedingly grateful to this wonderful congregation and its leadership for the welcome you've accorded. Okay, and now we get down to business. Since I'm teaching, I have to begin with a question. I always begin all my lessons with a question. And the question is, in your opinion, what is the most important value concept in all of Judaism? On what is all of Judaism based? We're going to take a single word, single concept. What would that concept be? Let's hear some here. Yes, ma'am.
I would say oneness.
Oneness. Good, okay. Freedom, good. Love. Fairness, all nice. Tzedakah, okay. B'tselem Elokim, okay. Anybody else?
Choice.
I would have two one words. Gloria said oneness. I was going to say monotheism, but I saw that will be one staff. The other will be ethics.
Okay, everyone through? No, we have one more. The Dur V'Adur, all nice, very, very, what? Distinction, right. Sort of Judaism summa cum laude, right? No. The answer is no. To all of them. To all of them. The central value concept in all of Judaism is something called brit. Not brit the cutting, but brit the covenant. We are a covenantal religion. As over and against Christianity, which is a religion of faith, we are a religion of ma'aseh, of actual act of commitment. Okay? Now, how did I get to this and what I'm doing now? I am involved in a project which I, in all due immodesty, developed with the American Jewish History Museum, which is in Philadelphia on Independence Square, along with the United States Constitutional Center, where the Liberty Bell is now housed, to develop a curriculum for Jewish and non-Jewish students, actually 2 or 3 curricula with the same genre, because American Jewish students are basically unaware ignorant, don't give a damn about their dual relationship, okay? I remember when I was a student, I had the privilege of being in Mordechai Kaplan's class, and he said, I'm that old, and he spoke about sancta, about the observances, about the behaviors that we have as Jews and behaviors we have as Americans, right? Then, much later, in the past 10 years, I've been the rabbi and teacher at the Solomon Schechter School in West Orange, New Jersey. You've heard of New Jersey? And our wonderful governor? Yes. Okay. I am, by the way, my wife and I both are among the non-28% who approve of Christie. So, I don't feel even celebrity status because of that. The fact is that 10 years ago, at the kind of the last task of my career, I got a job as teacher and rabbi at the Solomon Schechter School, and I was given a class to teach. It was under the category of the Bible department, not Judaism, but Bible and Tanakh. And the course was entitled Freedom and Responsibility. And I said to the rabbi who was the head of the department at the time, what does that mean? He said, whatever you want to make it, Michael. I said, a glace and dunk. And so I was given the task of developing a course on, and someone mentioned freedom here as one of those important concepts. It is a ancillary concept, but it is not the core. It's not the basis. And no one mentioned responsibility. And you said,
I didn't, but I thought.
no one said, I want you to know I got through college and graduate school on that same statement, okay. So I came home, I remember, and I said to my wife, what am I gonna do? And I thought about it for a couple of days, and it suddenly occurred to me that when I was an undergraduate, I went to Lehigh University. In a political science course, I was asked to read a book called Freedom and Responsibility in the American Way of Life. It was written by a distinguished professor of Cornell, Carl Becker, and I used that as the basis for creating my course. Now, there are and I will give Ami, if anyone wants it, a bibliography that, and of the articles I'm going to quote, because some of them are startling in terms of the understanding of a brit. There is a Jewish brit and there is an American covenant. They are not dissimilar. And I would like to say we have in many ways abandoned, both Jewishly and as Americans, the mandate of those covenantal relationships. It pains me, and Ami can tell you this because I used to kind of get all worked up about it, what we have done to ruin American holidays. What is Memorial? What do we do on Memorial Day? Thank you. Wait a second, we have a correct answer. She not only thought about it, but she said the right answer. What is it? We shop. What do we do on July 4th? Barbecue, and we shop. Now, the worst one, the one that makes me really upset, and Ami can tell you I can get very upset, right, Ami? Okay, is Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving was always sacrosanct. It was the holiday that all religions could observe, right? And that was, it was sort of coded. It was set aside in very Jewish terms. And now, I don't know what happens here in the West Coast. I'm an Easterner. There's now, stores are open on Thanksgiving. That's a shanda. It's an absolute shanda. It shouldn't be, okay? Because we have abandoned. Okay, now Ami can tell you what I do on July 4th because, well, certainly Thanksgiving, he grew up in that house. But what do I do on July 4th? Get up in the morning and I daven, and then what do? Well, I take out the Declaration of Independence and I read it, okay? And I reread it. And I look at, I have my own annotated version of the Constitution, the We the People, and then I have picked out certain parts and I read that, okay? That's part of my davening on July 4th. I come from a tradition where my father of Shalom took us to the military cemetery in the town parade on Memorial Day. Okay? I then taught in a Solomon Schechter school for 10 years. And I literally fought and got myself in a lot of trouble, which I'm very good at, by the way, to acknowledge November 11th. Well, I'm old enough to call Armistice Day, right? Okay. Now, joking aside, Veterans Day, Memorial Day. We do not acknowledge our American covenant in the Jewish community. I don't know, I can't comment on the West Coast, I don't know the West Coast, but I can tell you in school after school, in day school after day school, there is not a recognition of that the dual covenantal relationship. Yes, ma'am?
I will tell you that a lot of the kids don't know because I have a business at the beach and I ask young people why we celebrate the 4th. They don't know.
They don't know. They absolutely don't know.
And I hand out copies of the Declaration and with the food.
What better way to start the day on July 4th than to read the Declaration? Okay, now, so I knew I was going to talk about Brit today, and you all have the handout. On the handout, I copied from the JPS, which I used to head, commentary on the Book of Numbers, from which the Eitz Chaim was taken, okay, the commentary on Numbers. And today in our reading, we are reading the famous, Naso. What's in Naso that has the most recognition? The priestly blessing. So I had prepared this and I didn't give thought but last night I sat at my son's Shabbos table and watched him say that priestly blessing to his son, and then he came over and I put my hands on his head and I blessed him as well. Let's look at it, and in a way that I had not looked at it before. I want you to look at page 51, okay? It's the second page. And you see up it says, Yevarecha Hashem Yishmecha, Yevarecha V'Yukuneka, etc., etc. Look at the, I guess the beginning of the 1.5 paragraph. The first part of each line, do you have that? Invokes the movement of God toward his people. The second, his activity on their behalf. Hey, what's our relationship to God? Okay, I realize where I'm speaking and that there is a theology involved, and that one of the masters of developing that theology is Rabbi Schulweis. But in spite of that, I still look upon our relationship with God as ma'aseh, as an active, not a dialogue, but an activity. Let's continue. As rendered here, God initiates 6 actions. Dr. Milgram was absolutely unbelievable in developing this. 1, God has to bless and protect. I don't have time to develop what bless means. To shine and be gracious, to bestow and grant peace. However, the transitional and may indicate the consequence. Blessing results in protection. Okay, there's the covenant relationship. God's shining face results in grace. The bestowal of God's favor results in peace. Thus, the priestly blessing may actually express 3 actions. Okay, now I want to go down here and where it says there are those, etc. However, the collective of Israel is addressed in the singular elsewhere. And the response is in the plural. God, the singular, right, starts the process. His people continue the process, okay? And I encourage you, you can take it, I'll take it to show them, and I'll look at the rest of the Milgram commentary. Now, I've spoken about the Jewish aspect. Let's go. Oh, I changed that course, by the way. You remember Freedom and Responsibility and Carl Becker and all those nice things? I changed it to Sinai and Philadelphia. Not because I wasn't teaching in Philadelphia, but because the origin of the 2 covenantal traditions, one was Sinai, The other was, the Constitution was Philadelphia. Now, the Constitution of the United States was preceded by a document which does not get enough play, okay? It just doesn't get enough publicity. It's a fabulous document. It's called the Virginia Statute for Religious Freedom. And don't look, who do you think wrote it? Thomas Jefferson, okay? And look at the text of the statute. Whereas Almighty God hath created the mind free, that all attempts to influence it by temporal punishments or burthens, or by, think of our existential present situation. Civil incapacitations, great word, tend only to beget habits of hypocrisy and meanness. Sound familiar? And therefore are a departure from the plan of the holy author of our religion, who being Lord both of body and mind, yet chose not to propagate it by coercions on either, as was in his almighty power to do. That the impious presumption of legislators and rulers, civil as well as ecclesiastical, who being themselves but infallible, uninspired men, have assumed dominion over the faith of others, setting up their own opinions and modes of thinking. I mean, I couldn't have written this as well. As such, endeavoring to impose them on others. Okay? And I invite you to continue to read the rest of the material. Among the things I want to read to you was from, I read a couple of people regularly, weekly. One of them is the former chief rabbi of the United Kingdom, Jonathan Sacks, Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sacks. I recommend to you, and I'm sure Rabbi Feinstein or Ami can direct you to the website. He has a commentary on the Parsha every week, which is phenomenal. And I would like to read this to you. Think of the American idea of covenant. Moses believed that there would come a time when the idea of a nation founded on a covenant with God would inspire other nations with its vision of a society based not on it's not in your on a hierarchy of power, but on the equal dignity of all under the sovereignty and in the image of God, on the rule of justice and compassion. The nations, in quotes, would appreciate the wisdom of the Torah and its righteous decrees and laws. It happened, as I have argued many times, we see this most clearly in the political culture and language of the United States. Listen to these statements. To this day, American politics is based on the biblical idea of brit, of covenant. American presidents almost always invoke this idea in their inaugural addresses, in language that owes its cadences and concepts to the book of Devarim, where the Sinai covenant is really described. So for instance, in 1985, Ronald Reagan spoke of America as one people under God, dedicated to the dream of freedom that he has placed in the human heart. Called upon now to pass that dream onto a waiting and hopeful world, Ronald Reagan. In his inaugural in 1989, George Bush Sr. prayed, "There is but one just use of power, and it is to serve the people." Covenant. Help us to remember it, Lord. Amen. Oh, he said, amen. I said, amen. In 1997, Bill Clinton said, "The purpose we sought in a new land, we will find again in a land of new promise." Try that again. The promise we sought in a new land, we will find again in a land of new promise. George W. Bush said in 2001 said, "We are guided by a power larger than ourselves, who creates us equal in his image." In 2005, he declared, "From the day of our founding, we have proclaimed that every man and woman on this earth has rights and dignity and matchless value because they bear the image of the maker of heaven and earth." In 2009, Barack Obama ended his speech with these words, "Let it be said by our children's children that we were tested and we refused to let this journey end, that we did not turn back nor did we falter. And with eyes fixed on the horizon and God's grace upon us, we carried forth that great gift of freedom and delivered it safely to future generations. Okay, now I would like to share similar statements. I went over to the Philadelphia side. Let's do the Sinai side. The early belief that God entered into a covenant with the Israelites' ancestors did not allow the establishment of the monarchy. Nowhere is this better illustrated than in the actions of the prophets. Samuel is depicted as remonstrating with Saul, the first king of Israel, but the prophets, however, did more than take kings and princes to task for violating the law of God. They insisted that the covenant was binding both on the people as a whole and on each individual Israelite as a responsible member of the community. Now, that statement you can read during services this morning because it is on page 1416 of the Eitz Chaim, and the author name should be familiar to everyone here in Los Angeles area. It was Dr. David Lieber, the former president of the, what was it we used to call the UJ, right? Right, and Dr. Lieber was the editor-in-chief of the Eitz Chaim and wrote this masterful essay, okay? I want to quote from another source where the author deals with two questions. What does America learn from us? And what, let me quote it exactly right, what has America taught us? What has America learned from us and what has America taught us, okay? He continues in the first section, the greatest sin of society, according to the biblical prophets, is to render a human being invisible. That's a profound statement. I really resonated on that. Socially, every urban society tolerates a certain level of latent evil. We tolerate it by holding those who suffer out of sight, okay? The prophets demanded that we have eyes and that we see. In a democratic society, Heschel preached, some are guilty, but all are responsible. And this is another masterful essay, which you will find, I found on the VBS website, and those are the words of your rabbi and teacher, Rabbi Ed Feinstein. And by the way, you can look at the, as he said at the Shabbos morning teaching, but I, in preparation for coming out here, read through the sermons by Rabbi Feinstein, and boy, there's an awful lot to learn there. It's really unbelievable. While I'm quoting, I want to quote one more that I have here, and well, I may not have it, so I won't quote it. I want you to know, I want to quote one more, and this is written by a student at the Ziegler Rabbinical School, in an essay he wrote for a class in theology. And it deals with the passage in the Haggadah that says, B'chol dor v'dor chayav adam l'ra'ot atzmo ki'ilu hu yatsa mitzrayim. Every generation, every individual must see themselves as if they were out of Egypt. Again, an action, not it's the belief system that emanates from the action. And this student writes, the B'chol dor v'dor part in the Haggadah and praying in Judaism motivates us to assume responsibilities and seize the opportunities that only a free people can have. Of course, speaking up for those who still feel oppressed, and like Dr. Aryeh Cohen teaches us, we should take a stand for the cause of social justice. We also see this in the second part of the Aleinu prayer, L'taken olam b'malchut Shaddai, repair the world in God's kingdom. We share, he wrote this, not me, we share a partnership with God. Humanity is instructed to take the steps towards improving the state of the world. Both the Haggadah and the Tefillah teach us to take good care of ourselves and our loved ones, living our lives to their fullest potential and perfecting our mind, spirit, and soul. Shall I tell you who wrote that? Ami. And you can imagine my son. You can imagine this whole, I mean, besides the warm welcome at VBS, the encouragement that Rabbi Feinstein gave to Ami to go to rabbinical school, I don't have words. I cannot tell you what it means when we have our conversations, and I am relearning things that he is learning and take the great pride. But when he sent this to me, I cried, because one cannot ask for more than that, okay? Now, I want to read to you. You are probably very familiar with the famous letter of George Washington to the president of the Newport, Rhode Island Torah Synagogue. Okay? And where he says that everyone should sit in safety under his own vine and fig tree, and none shall make them afraid. But we never read the letter from the president of the congregation to which he was responding. You are in colonial America, okay? You are in 1792, I think, okay? And listen to this. This is the letter from the president of the congregation to the president of the United States, George Washington. Permit the children of the stock of Abraham. That's you and me. We're the children of the stock of Abraham. I guess here now we would say the stock of Abraham and Sarah. Okay? To approach you with the most cordial affection and esteem for your person and merits, and to join with our fellow citizens in welcoming you to Newport. With pleasure we reflect on those days of difficulty and danger, when the God of Israel, who delivered David from the peril of the sword, shielded your head in the day of battle. And we rejoice to think that the same Spirit who rested in the bosom of the greatly beloved Daniel, enabling him to preside over the province of the Babylonian Empire, rests and ever will rest upon you, enabling you to discharge the arduous duties of Chief Magistrate of these United States. Deprived as we heretofore have been of the invaluable rights of free citizens, we now, with a deep sense of gratitude to the Almighty, disposer of all events, behold a government, watch this, erected by the majesty of the people, a government which to bigotry gives no sanction, to persecution no assistance, but generously affording to all liberty of conscience and immunities of citizenship. What do we get by being Americans? Liberty of conscience and immunities of citizenship. Deeming everyone of whatever nation, tongue, or language equal parts of the governmental machine. This so ample and extensive federal union, whose basis is philanthropy, mutual confidence, and public virtue, we cannot but acknowledge to be the work of the great God, who ruleth the armies of heaven and among the inhabitants of the earth, doing whatever seemeth him good. For all the blessings of civil and religious liberty, which we enjoy under an equal and benign administration, we desire to send up our thanks to the Ancient of Days, the great preserver of men, beseeching him that the angel who conducted our fathers through the wilderness into the promised land may graciously conduct you through all the difficulties and dangers of this mortal life. And when, like Joshua, full of days and full of honor, you are gathered to your fathers, may you be admitted into the heavenly paradise to partake of the water of life, the tree of immortality. Okay? Now, you have to know, and I will recommend certain authors and books to you. Joseph Ellis, who is, there's been a spate of literature on the Founding Fathers. I recommend to you, rather than, before you spend your life savings on going to see Hamilton, read, I don't know, is it coming out here? I imagine. Save up. The book was based, the play used as its foundation a biography of Alexander Hamilton by a man named Ron Chernow. And it is a masterpiece. It's a large masterpiece. It's heavy reading, but it's great reading. You'll also find out the somewhat questionable Jewish origins of Alexander Hamilton, okay? And what I did was I downloaded the lyrics of Hamilton to read them. And one of the geniuses of the play, which is not mentioned in the reviews, is the fact that Hamilton stood apart from the chevra of the founding fathers. And he was the businessman. He was he saw his path and he followed it no matter what. And by that he incurred the wrath of a lot of people, including people like Aaron Burr, and the rest is in the play, which I don't want to spoil for you. One more comment on called Why the Covenant, written by another, in my estimation, outstanding rabbi. And this is talking about the bris. When I say bris, I mean the snipping. When I say brit, I mean the covenant, okay? This rabbi says, a covenant ceremony welcomes a child into the community of humanity as a developing moral agent responsible for working to perfect the world. Anyone want to take a guess on who said that? Close to home, Rabbi Harold Schulweis. Okay? Now, when I have taken part, I don't do the snipping, but when I have been the rabbi at a bris milah ceremony, I take this out and I read that sentence to the parents. And I always send the parents, or I did when I was more active in the rabbinate, this statement, a little card with this statement. Let me read it again. A covenant ceremony, the bris, welcomes a child into the community of humanity as a developing moral agent responsible for working to perfect the world. Wow. Wow. That statement is an absolute wow. Okay? Now, I would be remiss if I did not. I want to go through certain authors, and I will give Ami this bibliography of that motivated my interest in Brit. Yes?
The question you asked at the beginning, that people answered, something that came to my mind but I didn't answer was, we are the chosen one. We have responsibility for this, for society, for everyone else. Is that right or is it wrong?
That's kind of what you just described. Brit. Brit, that word responsibility, okay? You have a mission. You have a deal with God. In the writings of David Hartman, in which he writes about covenantal anthropology, he describes how God makes a decision in the book of Breshith, of Genesis, to self-limit. What does that mean? He cuts a deal with Adam and Chava, with Adam and Eve, that they would share responsibility for making the world that he created. After all, God was God, right? God could do anything that God wanted to do. But God said, I can't do it unless I have a partner. And I will share with you one of my great covenant stories from an old friend and colleague who was in Hillel with me. And he said, he tells the following stories. One day, the angels came to God and they said, how are we going to improve the world? And I'm sorry, they went to animals and they went to they went to the lion, who they thought was the mightiest animal, to the whale, and finally they went to God, and God said to them, I will work with you, and I will be your partner, and you will be my partner. And then the animals came to God, and they said, well, this is wrong with the world, this is wrong with the world. What can you do about it? And he said to them, I don't know, go ask my partners. Okay? I'll give you a summary of the story. I'll give Ami the full story. That's, it's very easy for us as human beings to lay the trip on God. God is responsible for everything. God made this happen. God did this, right? You know what? Yes, some things are God created. But most of the phenomena which we as human beings experience, we have input into that phenomena. we are responsible. Freedom is wonderful, but freedom doesn't come stam like that. Freedom comes with us taking the responsibility. Share with you, I guess my...
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
So Torah is full of mitzvot.
Right.
The brit in the Torah is, you gotta do this, and you gotta do this, and you gotta do this, and you
Yes,
gotta
sir.
do this. The American Constitution is full of rights. This is what the government can't do to you. This is what another citizen can't do to you. If you interpret America as a covenantal community, what are the mitzvot of American citizenship?
It's a great question. The mitzvot of the American experience may be found in court procedures. Okay? I never went to law school, but I have asked friends. I was kind of majored in constitutional law as an undergraduate with the thought of going to law school, and wound up doing what I did. The actions that are based on the Constitution become our mitzvot. The problem is that there is not a consistent national mitzvah, okay? The problem is that states and counties and subdivisions can all establish their own mitzvot. Why? Because the covenant in Judaism is a covenant with the Kodesh Baruch Hu. The covenant in American law, in the American system, is a covenant among human beings. These initial human beings established, and so initial human beings are going to manifest themselves in different ways. And so it behooves the teachers, the political leaders, any leader, to be more articulate about what those understandings are. I grew up, as I started my presentation, with the fact that Memorial Day and the Sancta July 4th were, in a sense, holy days, a different sense of Kodesh. And now, my friend here said the magic word shop, okay? That's not the mitzvah. There is a mitzvah of Thanksgiving. There is a mitzvah of sitting at a table and thanking God. There is a mitzvah of historical reminiscence. All of that takes place. It is much more difficult, and that is why it is, in some sense, more taxing but easier to understand what Judaism says than it is to understand what the American tradition says. I think I want to say one of our responsibilities is to find out. It is less easy to find out, but it is not a consistent, uniform code. On the other hand, out of that Constitution have come certain uniform codes. Right? There is a drinking age, I assume in California too, right? Okay, there is a voting age in California as well, right? Et cetera, et cetera. We are in the media age, we are much more aware of what these restrictions are. Anyone here drive without a license? You had to get a license. That's the law of the land. Okay, there was a question over here, sir.
No, not a question, it's a comment.
Please.
You talked about the mitzvot in the Constitution, and you mentioned Ron Chernow's book on Hamilton.
Yes.
It seems that Hamilton saw the first two sentences of the Constitution as being the mitzvah, that is the common welfare.
Absolutely.
Do it for the common welfare, and he basically said that statement provides the impetus for the establishment of federalism, basically on his part, in terms of the way we operate within the country. That the common welfare becomes the principle upon which we base our lives in this country.
Okay.
At which point he pushed for child labor to save money in manufacturing.
Yeah, we know that.
Okay.
He didn't push for it, he ignored it.
Okay. What you have done in good rabbinic tradition is you have created, you're sitting in the base medrash, and you created a commentary on Hamilton. And now we have the opportunity to, if you want, to sit and study and argue with you, okay? The fact that in my own research, Hamilton stood apart from the Federalists, okay? Those who were the authors of the Federalist Papers. And since there is such a spate of literature, besides Ron Chernow, you've got to read Joseph Ellis's His Excellency and understand, I mean, to me, the most profound piece in Joseph Ellis's book on George Washington. Do you know who he compared himself to, who he perceived himself to be? And what he was doing? Joshua. George Washington, beferish and clear language, said that the conquest of this land and the wresting of relationships with King George was a new settlement of the land. And instead of the land being Eretz Yisrael, the land was this new country. The fact that the books in the Shoftim record a very unpleasant, in some cases, entry into the new land and a very unpleasant treatment of the natives parallels to T exactly what our ancestors did to Native Americans. Horrible. But he had a mission. And you know who George Washington believed guided his mission? God. He believed, according to Ellis, and he documents it very beautifully, that he was God's messenger to save and create the new Israel. Yes, sir.
What we're talking about here is
Tikkun
Tikkun Olam.
Olam is the end result of the Brit. Okay? In other words, if you do all these things, one woman here mentioned tzedakah, right? Who mentioned tzedakah? Tzedakah is nice, okay? How would you translate tzedakah? I'm setting you up, so thank you. Okay, oh, you beat me to it. You have too informed a group here. I mean, most people would say to me charity, okay? It is not charity. Tzedakah is brit. It is what your responsibility is to make the world a better place, tikkun olam, okay? In other words, if this woman does what tzedakah I translate in a more fanciful way as the proper ordering of relationships between one person and another, okay? Which justice covers it but I'm a rabbi, so I say a lot of words for one concept, okay? But the tikkun olam that you talk about is a result of the tzedakah that this lady talks about. Yes, ma'am?
I think we're talking about the overall concept of shituf.
Yeah. What is shituf? Shituf means partnership. Well, covenant is the actualizing of shituf. Shituf is a concept, right? How do I'm a partner. Okay, you and I are going to do this together. That's shituf, the decision. But working it out and doing that's covenant. Okay. Any other statements?
Right here.
Sorry.
Building upon what Rabbi Feinstein said, this is the idealized version of Americana as it originally formed. But the realia is that in America, people feel obligation to self. They don't feel obligation to anything greater than self because of the notion of personal rights. And only when there's like a 9/11 or an Orlando does anybody have any sort of external sense of self. And so my question to you is, how do you reinstill this idea of covenant in America? Right, when it's already struggling in Judaism.
It's a fabulous question.
Right? It's already struggling in Judaism. That's what American Jews struggle with. All day long, it's in direct opposition to one another.
It's a profound challenge, and I thank you for that. I tend not to be a pie in the sky. As I get older, I'm less pie in the sky. Let me read to you, because it's a great ending, okay, from the person who really gave me this passion for Brit, for reading Covenant, and formed the basis for the work that I'm doing with the Museum of American Jewish History and the United States Constitutional Center. His name was Daniel Elazar. Danny and I, he was one of the great scholars of the American experience, and his the many books he wrote on Jewish life and Jewish sociology were a kind of hobby, and that is a shelf of about 12, 13 books. He was the world's expert in federalism, and he had a center for federalism in Philadelphia, a center in Bern, Switzerland, and a center in Jerusalem. Boy, does that really, so now you know where I get my inspiration from Danny. On his way to Washington to take the oath of office as President of the United States of America, and this is in a sense an answer to you, at a time when the United States itself seemed destined for dissolution, Abraham Lincoln pointedly stopped in Philadelphia to visit Independence Hall. Standing before that historic landmark on February 21st, 1861, Lincoln emphasized to his audience that he had come to listen to those breathings rising within the consecrated walls where the Constitution of the United States, and I will add, the Declaration of Independence was originally framed. Lincoln continued, "I have never asked anything that does not breathe from those walls. All my political warfare has been in favor of the teachings coming forth from that sacred hall. May my right hand forget its cunning and my tongue cleave to the roof of my mouth if I ever prove false to those teachings," okay? You are absolutely right. We live in an egocentric, selfish society. But I gotta tell you, my own experience, and I've had a lot of years, thank God, is that there are people in this world touched my life. I'm sure there are those who have touched your life. Listen to them harder, okay? And respect them more, because they will save the society. And they will emerge in places where you least expect, but they will be fulfilling their part of the breed. Thank you.
So I'll leave you with a question, and then we have to go daven. First of all, thank you to Rabbi Monson for joining us, and Mazel Tov on your grandson's graduation.
Thank you, thank you.
The beginning of many graduations. And next week, of course, we'll continue. It'll be the closing Torah study. So we're going to do the whole rest of the Torah in one evening, in one morning. So it'll be next morning. One morning. No, we'll just do one morning. But I think that the question that Rabbi Monson has raised is a very interesting question. Okay? And given the events, it was very, very sad. It was such a crazy week. I mean, it was not only was this horrible, horrible, monstrous event, but then all the repercussions of the event that went all week, the political commentaries and the constant television. It's been a terrible, terrible, terrible week. So the question that remains is this, okay? So you have a Torah, and the Torah is the record of the obligations and responsibilities of the human covenantal partner with respect to the divine covenantal partner, right? 10 commandments. So you begin with 10 commandments and then move on to 613 commandments. Okay? If America is rooted in a similar idea of covenant, okay? So I would argue with you just on one point. I don't think that Constitution is the core of the American covenant. I think Constitution only defines the limits of government. I think that the Constitution assumes something which was apparent to the forefathers but not apparent to us, which is a civil society, a community of human beings, adults, who understand what they owe each other and what they owe the collective. And that, the founding fathers were so civilized men that to them that was assumed. You didn't have to write that down. It was assumed that you owed something to your neighbor. It was assumed that you owed something to the collective. It was assumed that you owed, for example, a whole ethic of service and honor, which, as Shari points out, we have lost in the last 2 or 3 generations, right? So the question is, what are the mitzvot? What are the obligations, if you were to try to recover them? The obligations of civil society, what we owe each other, what we owe each other. We had Memorial Day a couple of weeks ago, remember? And if you're here, we've done this many years now, for 5, 6 years now, we've invited veterans to come. We've got over 200 men and women who come, and we have people from the Second World War, some older fellas, and people from Korea, Vietnam, people fought in Desert Storm, and the more recent Iraq and Afghanistan, right? Well, few. And what's remarkable is that when you ask them, well, why did you go? And so many of them will say, because my country needed me. Right? And it's even that, by the way, now I'm rapping, so even that, if you the television commercials now for the Army don't ask you to serve.
Right.
They say, go there and be all you can be. There was even one which was remarkable. Talk about individualism. There was an ad campaign for the United States Army called an Army of One.
Right.
Think about that. It's not about what I owe my country, the sense of service, the self-sacrifice in response and gratitude for the gifts of freedom. It's what I can get out of what I can get out of the experience, right? So here's the question. What is it? What do we owe each other? What are the rules and obligations and responsibilities of civil society that make a democracy possible? Okay, and what are the by the way, their mitzvot come in two forms, you know. There's thou shalts and there's thou shalt nots. So without getting terribly political, right? Are there things we just don't say? Because we know that they come from the worst part of ourselves, and we quell those parts of ourselves, and we control what we say in the public sphere, because that will destroy the common network of relationships that makes a civil society possible. And there are things that we owe each other as part of a civil society. And are there freedoms we are willing to give up in order to be part of a civil society? Right? Does the Second Amendment of the Constitution really say that I can own a military style,
No, it does not.
military grade assault weapon with extended cartridges and all the bullets I want? Is that really the freedom guaranteed by that? Or is there a common sense that no civil society allows that? We concentrate violence in the core of, in a certain place that's controlled by the collective, and we don't just spread it all over the damn place. And similarly, you know, what are the obligations that we have to each other? This is a very, very interesting question, and as we've watched the events of this last week, it's a question you begin to ask with some earnestness, because if we lose these obligations, then the society begins to disintegrate. And I don't know about you, but that was the feeling I got listening to the news. A sort of disintegration of what it means to live together peaceably in a civil society. And that's a very scary thing. So I just want to leave that question out there. I want to thank Rabbi Monson for his wonderful teaching this morning.
Thank you.
And
I also, if I could say one more thing.
and there's lasagna for lunch. So.
I said to as I said to Ami, I said, I'm looking forward to doing the teaching, but I'm really upset that I'm not going to hear Rabbi Feinstein. So, you know, everything is a giveaway, a trade-off.